So today we have the wonderful Mr. Ryan Dawson Laight. Um, we're just going to chat about what you're doing. So I know right now you're actually working on a show. What are you working on at the moment?
I'm currently working on a few things. That's kind of how it works. There's always a few, and even at this time, there seems to be a few things on the table, which is good. Um, Today, I'm working on a show called Groom to Perfection, which is a piece that we are creating in the bowels of the Theatre Royal Brighton. So we are creating a piece. We've done this piece of work live before, and now we're kind of filming it for a kind of live podcasting filmed podcast. What is a filmed podcast?
I was going to say, how do you do theater in a podcast?
I don't know what that is, but I think the podcast is related to the film and then to stuff on the website. But basically, the piece is about Ava Braun and her final hours in the bunker before she was shot dead. Is that right? Sounds about right, doesn't it? Anyway, we're working under the stage essentially in the basement of the Theatre Royal, right in the bowels of its theatre space. And so what I've done is I filled it. I'm working with a brilliant lighting designer called Zoe Spur, and we have filled the whole space with broken lamps and lampshades. And she kind of works and wanders around this space. It's very kind of atmospheric. It's a really beautiful, beautiful piece. So we kind of return to that. I'm obviously from Brighton. I live in Brighton. And so it's really nice to be doing a piece of work on my doorstep, because it's like 5 minutes down the road. And
so the dream.
it's nice. It's nice. It's nice little project, There's loads. I mean, we're in a very confined space trying to create theatre. You can imagine how ideal that isn't at this time.
Yeah, I was going to say that's tricky in more than one way at the moment. Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, it's good. It's good. I also got lots of dance on at the moment. I do a kind of equal amount of both things. So often it's theatre stuff, and then it's lots of dance. And so I'm currently working on a piece for National Youth Dance Company, which is a new artistic director every year works with a group of very, very talented young dancers in this country, and it culminates in a big piece of work that tours and then comes into Sadler's, and they have a different artistic director working with them every year, and this year it's a brilliant choreographer called Alessandra Sutan. And so I've kind of got my work cut out with that at the moment. Myself and one of my makers, we were knocking on the door of fabric shops on Monday morning because our shops opened.
Yeah.
And so I was shopping for 3 shows, with my eye on that, and then kind of, because I'm in need of shopping, but also I was just so excited to be back in those spaces and touching fabric, because that's been one of the hardest things, to try and do.
Yeah, I would imagine, because I know you've been working on shows was it a university? And like Boudica, which I've been drooling over the pictures of that. It looks fabulous. But it must be so much more difficult to make a show when you can't actually in person go and touch and feel and look and play with the fabrics, and just have to kind of rely on that.
I mean, I quite like the challenges of not being able to do certain things. If your hand is forced to do something other, I think often the detail in the design can be more interesting. So, for instance, Boudica, which I've been working again with a local brand new musical theatre degree course in Brighton. Institute of Contemporary Theatre. They're based here. I think they have schools in Berlin and other towns. Because of the restrictions, I was like, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? And so I have done it, but I decided that I would do it all out of dust sheets. So I would basically dye and buy and rip up dust sheets and basically just create this beautiful kind of dust sheets. Have a kind of part mount cotton, part mount plastic, and so actually they dye in a really interesting way. I dyed loads of them through kind of I guess kind of browns through kind of pinks through kind of, and we got this really beautiful palette of stuff that's really texturally really beautiful, and that's kind of how that show kind of came to look the way it did. I mean, I had really beautiful kind of dresses cut in a very beautiful way that looked very kind of the period. But yeah, that was a real like, yeah, find. It was a lot of work, loads and loads of work. It was all kind of hand dyed and all sorts. But I do really enjoy that as a process, rather than I'll just buy that from there and then I'll send that to the maker and then they'll make that thing and then that's done. It's not a lazy way of doing it, but obviously it's not. I just don't think it's as visually kind of, it doesn't, the end product isn't as visually kind of exciting as it is if your hands have been on it and you've
What's the difference between buying off the rack and getting a couture gown? Basically, is
yeah, definitely.
Everything is custom, which makes a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Do you think that, like, when you design, then, because I know there are some designers who really are focused on the design itself and then do hand it over, but it sounds like you're definitely, once it's designed, you get your hands in there and you still muck about, even though you're technically not the maker. Because I've, like, through your workshops, I've definitely seen you have skills, you can make things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand a world where I certainly have never really had an opportunity to be in a room and have enough people around me for me to be able to hand them over. I'm working at a certain level, right? And that's not necessarily high, it's not necessarily low. I'm really happy with where it is. It doesn't afford me a massive team, but it does afford me a few people working with me, but still, I don't think I'll ever be the person who just hands it over and says, could you just do this? And then that's it. I've done a draw. Here's a drawing. Could you just blah, blah, blah. I know that people do that. And I'm sure that works for some people, but I'm so preoccupied with color and texture and what the final outcome will be, that actually, if I haven't done all of the kind of exploring around that as an initial starting point, then I just can't, I think I'm either really useful in the process to a supervisor, or I'm really annoying. And whatever that is what it is, but yeah, I'm really interested in being a part of it. I don't not want my hands to be in it. And that's not because I'm controlling in any way, because a big part of my process is my reliance on the people who I kind of collaborate with, to do with the makers that I use, the people who cut the fabric, the people who supervise. They all have an opinion on what I produce. So I will have done all of this work in terms of kind of texture and pattern and fabric sampling and drawings and what have you, but actually the other part of the process is their response to that and how they put that work together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, if you're lucky enough to work with people that actually have been doing it for a while, or have that skill, why not take advantage of it and say, great, this is what I've come up with, what do you think? Makes sense.
I mean, like, they're all people who, we work, I guess I kind of tend to work with the same team of people, but that's to do with, the people who I trust, the people who I have collaborated with for a long time, the people who I know are the kind of, the 40% of everything that I kind of produce. The idea, I'm 60% of the ideas, and their 40% is what makes my work kind of my work and what it looks like. That's what I always kind of believe anyway. That's not to say that there's not room for new people to join in and for me to collaborate with new people, because I'm definitely not a closed workshop. Like, collaboration is, I think, is the key to all, successes.
Yeah, well, it definitely seems like you have, I don't know if a style is the word you want to look for, but I feel like looking through your past projects, there's definitely something I feel like if you gave like a police lineup of costumes, you'd be able to pick out what you've designed, because there is definitely sort of a standard that you work to, I think.
That's funny. I mean, some people ask me what I think my style is, and what do you think my style is then? When you look at it, what do you see?
See, I don't know that that's why I was like, style, I feel like isn't the right word, but there's something that's very, I feel like no matter what it is, there's a bit of organic There's an organic touch to it and a bit of, frankly, a bit of cheekiness that I like. But I think it's still, it hasn't gotten to the point, there's always the danger of this has now become my fashion show. This has become all about me and, oh yes, they're characters, whatever. But you could still definitely do serve the characters. But I think there's always a touch of the earth of yeah, that organic nature to it, which I think is lovely, frankly. And if it makes sense too, then if that's how you work with your fabrics through, or at least this time through, dyeing and working with the different colors and feeling it, it makes sense that you're very tactile with everything, because that's how your costumes read, I think, a lot.
Yeah, that's really funny. It's funny that you think of them like that. I mean, I guess that is right. I tend to fall. The truth is, like all designers, I think you get to a point where you kind of fall into the things that work. So
Yeah.
whether that's to do with color or the materials you use or the patterns you're cutting, and then you just jazz them up depending on the words that the director is throwing at you. So you mold it based on the stories that you're telling, but essentially you kind of stick to what you've done before, or that there's a progression of that same idea. So I think you're right. I think naturally when you then look back at the work that's gone previously, it kind of all starts to line up. I'm often really interested in seeing actually Instagram does this. I'm so obsessed with Instagram as a portfolio. That actually I spend so much time thinking about what do those 3 images look like next to those 3 images next. It becomes this whole thing. But actually, when I look at the Instagram feed of work, I'm like, oh, that's so enjoyable. It's so enjoyable. And I think as an audience member, I think it's really important for an audience audiences don't always know why they are enjoyed by something they're seeing. Some audiences barely know there's been a designer designing the costume.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think if there is a thing, there is such a thing as like, that is so, that really makes me feel something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially when an audience member isn't necessarily super familiar with theater or the workings behind stage, like you said, so many people are like, oh my gosh, that's a job? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
That's when I think that your designs are working well, when they still feel something, even though they didn't even know, they can't describe it, but they just go, oh, that was amazing.
I think that's right.
Yeah. When you design, do you tend to, I mean, I know it's always a bit of a jumble, but do you tend to keep the audience in mind as far as what they would enjoy? Or do you tend to work with what the director wants to see? Because I know there's two different ways of like what will make the audience just pass out from joy in their seats, and then what will just make the director happy and see on stage what he wants. Do you feel like there's one way or the other? Or do you tend to match?
There's another layer to that, and that is the producer. There is like the producer. You are employed because they enjoy the aesthetic, and I think they see your aesthetic as something that is in line with their audience. So normally I'm designing with an audience in mind, based on the fact that this theatre has this particular audience. And so I guess what I mean by that is so if I talk about the work that I do at Chichester, there is a very there's a very particular audience that go and see that work in that house. And so whilst that doesn't mean I design safely, I don't really ever design safely anywhere. There is always a kind of, as you call it, cheeky kind of comics, kind of unusual kind of tilt to the world. But you're always you always have that audience in mind, 100%. It's the same when I design for crump and hip hop contemporary dance, which is a very unusual part of what I do. I do loads of work with some brilliant contemporary dancers and contemporary choreographers, and that work is so different to that work and that world. But actually, there's still a clash because I'm the person who's in the middle of it. I'm still using the same colors and the same kind of slightly kind of unusual kind of shapes, textures, fabrics. But actually, the two world, even though I'm designing for that world, for the dance world, and for that particular audience who enjoy crump, contemporary dance and hip hop, it's always on my mind, of course, because that audience are not going to appreciate, that thing. It's always about the viewer. I mean, obviously, the director has had a massive hand in what it is that we're creating, and hopefully, within the right kind of partnership, we've been doing that together. Not great partnerships is where the director has made all of the decisions ahead of any kind of conversation, and then we're suddenly doing a show based on all of the things that they wanted.
Right. Yeah.
That's great, right? That's not great. That's not a collaboration, and that's not that. Like the designer designs, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's always tricky when you're like, oh, I'm just fulfilling your fantasy. Okay, great. Do you think, I mean, obviously you have your fairly set team, give or take. I know you work with like Kingsley Hall a lot, which I've seen, which is wildly jealous because his creations are painfully beautiful.
And King, I mean, I don't know anybody who has he will hate me speaking about him like this, but he's firstly a great friend. He's one of my very best friends. And secondly, he's somebody who brings a lot of my kind of work to life. So he's a brilliant maker, he's a brilliant pattern cutter, and he's the person who tells me that it's rubbish. And says
everyone needs one of those, yeah.
He's the one who goes, I'm not sure, are you sure? And when we're fabric shopping, I'll hold up a piece of fabric and he'll be the first to say that's disgusting. I'm not making that. So yeah, he's brilliant. But what I was going to say about Kingsley, he's actually a really beautiful person with a beautiful soul, and actually that then comes through in the kind of aesthetic of what his work kind of is. He's brilliant. Sorry, I really went off on a tangent about Kingsley.
No.
I'm gonna say he is brilliant.
I mean, it's always nice to know that the person that when you drool over their costumes, it's nice to hear that they aren't totally wretched.
Yeah. There's nothing worse than wretched. I don't really have many wretched people in my life,
Like the kind of person that really would. What if that most upbeat? I just remember your workshop, and I was like, this is like human Prozac. This is amazing.
That's hilarious. Can I quote you for?
Oh, please do.
Like that would be good. I know. I mean, I having done. I've been working, in theatre for a long time, and sometimes in places where it wasn't necessarily nice, and in environments that felt slightly toxic. And by that I mean kind of, I obviously can't say much about what that is exactly, but certainly, you can very easily find yourself in a room full of quite toxic kind of people who have been working in a certain place for a long time, and actually that could be really damaging, for young people going into the industry. And I've never really been a young person going into the industry because I had a career before I was a designer in the theatre. I've always been in the theatre, so I'm quite hardened to it. But actually, when I put in work together, I'm really conscious of the team that are putting it together. I'm really conscious that it's a really kind of calm, fun, joyful environment. It's one of the most important things to me, actually. Way before I'm interested in your skills, I'm interested in whether you've got joy in your heart. That's what I need. Those are the people I surround myself with. That's what I think. You only need that to create work. That's all you need.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I guess skills can be learned, but you can't really.
Definitely, you can teach somebody to do a thing, right?
What I mean? Exactly. Yeah, that's why I've noticed. Sorry, go ahead.
just buy a pair of shoes, and then they'll look lovely next to, I'm
Yeah.
joking. I know the skills, there are skills involved as well, but if there were a lineup of people and they've got those skills, they've got those, but they were treacherous and those were, you know what I mean, and that
Oh,
person,
sure.
that person 100%.
Absolutely, it makes sense. I mean, that seems to make sense as well. If you work with the same people, then you kind of know what you're in for, and there's not going to be a lot of surprises.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine it's always kind of scary when you get somebody new, and you can interview someone, but until you actually work with them, you don't know how they're going to handle stress, especially when we're in tech week. It must be tricky to go, oh, this is what you're like under pressure. Okay, great, didn't know that.
It's really funny. Not many people ever ask me for a job.
Really?
I think that I think it is more, like considering, access to people in the industry has never been better. I could go onto my Instagram now and I could contact anybody from, Lizzie Clacken, Sutra Gilmore, Ray Smith, blah, blah. I could send them a message. If I was bold enough, I would send them a message, right? And I would say, hey, I really like your work. Any chance I can, if I was bold enough. I'm
Right.
really surprised that not more people are doing that, because I think you're probably told not to do that at university. I didn't do a theatre degree, so I don't actually know what people are taught or told what to do and not to do,
Mhm.
But actually, I think anybody who isn't just making contacts at a time when, in my day, in my early days, right, you couldn't get anywhere near. You had to there was a book called Contacts that had basically got the agents in and the blah, blah, blah. That's how it was, when now it's just so accessible. What I was going to say is actually not many people do ask me for work, but the people who have are probably the people who are on my team. Like Elliot Squire, who's also a brilliant designer, brilliant model maker, brilliant supervisor, and brilliant friend. He arrived from Canada about 5 years ago. Went on the internet, looked at designers who he liked, messaged me and said, "Oh, I really like your work. Any chance I can come and do a couple of days with you?" He's been with me ever since, and he
Yeah,
literally works with me on every project, really.
that's amazing. Yeah, I think it's part of it is just being bold. I think, especially if you work behind the scenes, it can be easy to just say, "Oh, well, I'm not the bold type," and that's all it takes sometimes is a bit
It's
of
really
like,
daunting, isn't it? I think it's really hard to. I mean, that's not to say that people haven't messaged me. They have. I recently had a message from a student asking for a placement, and obviously it was COVID and blah blah blah. And actually, in response to some of my drawings, I asked her. I took her on and said, "Yeah, of course you can. We're in COVID, so we'll work it out." And I basically sent her some of my drawings, and in response to that, she did some of her own drawings. I then sent her some of the materials that I was working with. She did some kind of low-level making. It was all a part of what I was trying to give her a real experience of how I work with Kingsley, or how I work, so I would send them this. Anyway, she sent me so many brilliant things back that I then said to her, well, why don't you make the leads costumes? And she basically, her experience with me was to make and create the lead costumes for the show. And she did an amazing job. She did an amazing job. When she graduates, I would so give her a job. But she had the balls to message me and ask, just ask.
hmm,
I'm really open to helping people out, or giving them a leg up, or if I can. It's not always easy to, but where I can, I 100% will. I mean, I'll probably get loads of people messaging me now. I don't mind. That's fine, right?
it's a nice problem to have sometimes. You're like, oh, I'm just too popular. Oh no.
You know what? I think it's a really tricky business. It's noted, isn't it? It's a really tricky business to be in, right? And it's a more than ever, I think, for young people. I think it must be so hard and daunting trying to work out what that next step is. Certainly at this time, on the ladder, into that room, into that space, and continue working in this world.
Oh yeah, yeah, and to have people that are open to taking you on at any level is amazing. And I know you do. I did one of your workshops about a month ago that was
You did very well as well.
stop, stop. But I know you also do them for children and younger kids at the, was it at the V&A before all this madness happened, and you work basically with people of all ages. I think it's nice to see that you do that as well with, it sounds like that's how you work, not just in the workshops, but also beyond that when you're working with, you know, people in placements, that you really do give them a chance to just go and explore, which is
I
amazing.
love, I mean, I launched the workshops, and I launched kids workshops and adult workshops. But what I always say of teaching children or young people, I treat them the same. I run the same energy with them. I go at them in the same way that I go at anybody, you know, which is, you know, it's about creating an environment where people feel free enough to really experiment with what it is that they're doing. I mean, the truth is, you know, children really inspire my work, I think, because I think there is a childish quality to it, and I think there is a fun element to it, and I think there is a make, do, amend element to it. And kids do weird things without any, they have no kind of barriers or sensors for stuff. And that's quite nice to try and kind of channel that as a designer. I think is really good. I'm currently running workshops for the Bubbling Matildas for the Netflix movie. Which is like an eight-week program that the producers asked me to put together for the kids who are essentially in their hotels at the weekend because they're you know, on location filming. That's hilarious because those kids are obviously, those kids are like, you know, these brilliant young theatre kids of all ages, shapes, sizes, and they really throw themselves at the workshop. And it's, I always leave those workshops feeling so inspired. Adult ones as well, you know, the adult ones really kind of, you know, they attracted, you know, designers like yourself, young designers. They attracted all people from all over the kind of business, and it's really inspiring, you know, like working. I think teaching is a brilliant way of you know, hearing yourself as well, hearing your own ideas out loud almost, or kind of through critique. You kind of understand what you do and don't like. It's a really good way of kind of finding out what you are almost. So it works both ways. You learn, I learn, I think, you know.
That's excellent. Yeah, it makes sense because you definitely, I'm sure you, at least subconsciously as well, get lots of ideas from, you know, a spark of an idea that somebody made a thing that just went, oh, I wonder if that would work as XYZ. So
100%, you know, but that's about collaboration, isn't it? That's what happens in collaboration. That's what happens when I bring four makers in a room together and I throw words into the middle of the table and they go, oh, right, okay, right, so it's a robot made out of a thing and the arm does this, and then, oh, and that opens there, you know, like that's what I love, you know.
That's wonderful. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but it was, I mean, I feel like I could chat for you for hours, but
We've been chatting and we've done quite well, like 43 minutes. Yeah, that's quite good, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. I don't want to, we could turn this into like a 3-hour epic movie, but I will stop. But thank you so much for chatting. It was, I mean, delightful. And also I feel like I actually learned something, which is,
Oh, that's really good. I really like that. I think you've got like a glamorous kind of 1980s writer vibe about you today. Do you know? It looks to me like you're on some sort of chaise longue. I'm really enjoying it. Just to
well, thank you, darling. Oh.
yeah, exactly. Listen, it's really nice. Thanks for asking me to come in. Listen, I will literally talk. I'll talk the hind legs off a donkey.
Well, this is good information to have. Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for joining my workshop when you did. And as I say, you did do brilliant work in it, of course.
It was so much fun. If I wasn't in the middle of moving, I probably would have done, you know, all the rest. But next time. All right. Well, thank you again, Ryan, and have a fabulous day.
I will do. Thank you. I'm going to go for a walk on the beach.
I'm wildly jealous. That's it. I don't like you anymore.
I know, exactly. Listen, good to see you. Lots of love. I'll speak to you soon.
Very soon. Yes. Bye-bye.